Hello, hello, hello. My name is Rasen, and we're here today with the Final Fantasy VII Remake. Well, actually, the Final Fantasy VII Remake demo. It's a few days, about 3 days before the game proper comes out, though. In a lot of places, due to weird COVID-19 logistical stuff, it's been released early. I know apparently in Australia, there's just copies out and about in the wild, all willy-nilly, so if you're in Australia and you want to get the game a few days early, I guess go look around. They'll also remain safe and, practice social distancing and whatnot, because we're still in the middle of a pandemic. I don't want anyone, causing harm to their health because they want to get a video game a few days early. That would be silly. But enough about that. Let's talk about let's stop talking about our dystopia so we can talk about this fictional dystopia of Midgar. So this is a remake of Final Fantasy VII, which is a game that I happen to like a lot. It's not my favorite Final Fantasy, not my favorite JRPG, but one that I think is pretty damn good, and I know that there's a lot of people who, there's kind of a backlash to it, like, oh, it's overhyped, and, people talk it up too much, it hasn't aged well, all that stuff. I've never really agreed with that. I've always really enjoyed this game, enjoyed what it had to say, its cast of characters, and I think it's just a very solid addition to the mainline Final Fantasy series. It's not my favorite. I happen to like quite a few other ones more. Like, I like 9 a lot, I like 5 a lot. Actually, I enjoy Tactics a whole boatload too, even though it's not really a mainline Final Fantasy or anything. But, there's other RPGs that I like more than this one. That being said, I do have a lot of love in my heart for Final Fantasy VII, and, even just the shot of the city and then the logo cut in here, so fucking good. Like, this gets my heart fluttering, and, the weird, awkward, emo 12-year-old in me just starts to, vibrate uncontrollably when I see this all play out in this beautiful fidelity, and it's everything that teenagers that spent way too much time on weird anime and JRPG forums in the mid-2000s ever wanted visually from this setting, So it's safe to say I am very excited for this game, and that is honestly something that I'm happy to say, because frankly, Final Fantasy for the past decade or so has really lost me, especially the mainline series in a few regards. 12 is a game that when it came out, I was kind of and I mean, keep in mind I was young at the time, but, by that point I had played more than my fair share of Final Fantasies, infinite free time when you're in your youth and all that. And I remember when 12 came out being like, oh, geez, this is kind of a weird direction for the series, and I wasn't sure how to feel about it. I now appreciate 12 a lot more. I actually really like what that game does with its setting and the very political nature of the story. I just love Ivalice as a setting. It's fantastic, even if I don't necessarily care for all of the cast of 12. And, I kind of grew to appreciate its take on the gameplay, even though I think that, the vanilla version of that game is very problematic in its design, and Zodiac Age did a lot to kind of fix it and make it more interesting, or I guess technically International, and then it became Zodiac Age when it finally got released over here, but, so 12 grew on me, but 13 I had played through with a childhood friend who I had also played through 10 with, and we both really wanted to like that game a lot, and for a fair bit of it, we were kind of like, yeah, this is fun, and the more we played, the more we were like, oh, maybe we don't actually like this, and 13 past a point does open up more, and I mean, I don't even think the linearity was ever the problem with 13. I think that complaint is a little overblown. I think 13 is a game that just suffers from a lot of bizarre decision-making in the storytelling and just even the game design process, and when it starts to find its path, it gets a lot better later on, but I just think it takes way too much time to do that, and I think by the time it has the wheels spinning, I find that I just am not invested enough to give much of a shit. The other two 13 games didn't really care for. I think from what I played of 13-2, I started to like that a bit more, but I never beat it. Lightning Returns, I just could not stand at all from what I played of that. 14, I understand is fantastic by everyone who plays it, but I'm not really an MMO guy, so I can't comment on it. And then that brings us to 15, which I wanted to like a lot, but I I don't know. It's just, it didn't have what I wanted out of a Final Fantasy. I know 15 has a lot of fans, and for a lot of people, that was where the series really returned to form. 15 to me felt like a weird, watered-down AAA Western take on Final Fantasy, even though it wasn't made by Westerners. It really felt like it took a lot of what I don't like about open-world Western game design philosophy and slapped it onto Final Fantasy in a way that I really didn't like it. I really didn't like how it handled combat. I thought it felt mushy and bad. The open world I didn't think was particularly well handled. I know that the game was supposed to feel like a road trip, but I found that I kept going back and forth so often to do side quests and stuff that road trip sensation really didn't do much for me. It just didn't work. And I know there's people that really love the four, pretty boys of that game. I didn't end up caring for them as much as I wanted to, and I ended up not finishing 15 and watching the rest of it through a YouTube playthrough. And even just when that game starts to, get towards its later section, you could really see where they had to cut the corners, and even, there was that day one patch that added in cutscenes, or, scenes from Kingsglaive to try to add really awkward exposition that felt like it should have been there, and it just felt like a mess. And I'm one who likes messy games, but it just felt like a mess in a way that I did not find endearing really in any form. It felt like it felt overindulgent and kind of excessive in a way that it just kept piling on shit. And then I know that, later DLC really ended up making that game better in a lot of people's eyes. I never really got around to any of that, and then, obviously, a lot of that stuff ended up getting canceled, which is a bummer, because it sounds like they were really doing a lot to support that game, and I'd actually be curious to try playing through that game again at some point, even though I know that a lot of those complaints I have won't go away. So yeah, I've been down on Final Fantasy for a bit here, and I guess the only other one to reference is Type 0, which I also wanted to like a lot, but I thought the story was trying way too hard to be edgelord for its own good, and I also didn't care for the combat in that. I've really struggled finding a Square Enix developed action RPG system that I end up giving a shit about. I really need to get further into Kingdom Hearts, because, I kind of dropped off playing those around a little after 2, when that came out. That was the last one I ever played, and I know that Kingdom Hearts is kind of where a lot of action RPG aficionados go for their good gameplay and stuff like that, so I really need to give that series more of a go, I know. But the storytelling kind of lost me when I was younger, and I didn't develop the good humor and sense to just appreciate the silliness for what it is, as I think a lot of people ended up doing for Kingdom Hearts as it went off the rails. But yeah, so Final Fantasy was always the big main Square Enix action RPG series for me, because obviously after 10 the series really started to move in a different direction, and I've always been more of a turn-based guy, but I don't know, they just never gelled with me at all, and I've always looked at stuff like Nier Automata and have been like, yeah, please do something like this or whatever, because I always felt like they tried going for these weird hybrid systems that never really ended up panning out or really amounting to anything. They just always felt more awkward than they were worth, like almost as if they were too much of an RPG to really breathe as an action game, and almost maybe a little too actiony to fully breathe as an RPG. Just this weird awkward middle ground I always felt with these games. Final Fantasy VII Remake's gameplay, from what I've experienced just through this demo alone, feels like after 10 awkward years of me not really caring for any of these games' combat systems, finally feels like one that I can really get behind. I absolutely adore everything. Just the act of touching this game and not having things feel mushy, having everything feel really nice and responsive when you hit buttons. This nice mix of just swinging your sword around like this and being able to do good damage and having enemies stagger and all these particle effects going on, and seeing that life bar go down, but then when you really need to get in there and do some tactical stuff, you can do these, you can store up your ATB gauge here, and then use actions, and all of your different abilities have a purpose. Like, some of them build up the stagger bar more, and there's a whole stagger system in this game that's kind of like a little bit like 13 and other games that they've tried doing here, and just everything about this feels like they looked at everything from the other games and they're like, okay, what worked here, what didn't work here, and how can we implement all these ideas and kind of figure out what we were going for but make it feel really good. And I think they just nailed it. It's just so nice to be able to be unironically, like almost childishly, like excited for a mainline Final Fantasy release again after so many years of me being cynical and just thinking that Final Fantasy was never going to be what I wanted it to be anymore. In a lot of ways, that's how I felt about the series. And, you know, I branched out to other series. I mean, I've always been a fan of Dragon Quest, always been a fan of Saga, Shin Megami Tensei, you know, going on to other companies here, and, you know, just I always figured, okay, maybe this just isn't for me anymore, and I need to accept that this is always going to be this big budget, overproduced thing. And I mean, in some ways, this is a big budget, overproduced game, right? But I love the visual direction of this game. I can already feel, I think that this is going to be a little less open world and a little more, like, focused areas. Just given what I've seen of this game so far, and I'm down with that. Like I said, I never thought that the whole linearity thing that people cited as a problem with games like 13 was ever an issue. Like, 10 is a fantastic game. 10 is a series of hallways back and forth. And even if you go back to the, like, 16-bit Final Fantasies and a lot of them, what you find is that you have an open world, but in a lot of cases you'll find that there's not much optional stuff to do anyways, other than the vague side quest here or there. And you're kind of just being funneled to different points anyways. Like, there's more of an illusion of choice for a lot of the classic Final Fantasies. And that's not even really like a diss at them or anything. I love those games, but you know, I've never minded the linearity thing, and in fact, in a world where every game now feels the need to be open world and filled to the brim with just useless bullshit to do, I'm pretty happy with what seems to be a little bit more of a targeted big budget approach thing that they're doing here. Or not even big budget, all these games are big budget. That really doesn't mean anything anymore, but I mean, like, really focused in different areas and stuff like that, it seems like. That being said, I do know that they've basically announced that they really wanted to flesh out Midgar as a setting, and I think I saw an interview recently where someone said something like they really wanted all of the different sectors to feel like they had their own culture, and like they were different parts of like a city, actually, that had their own feel and look to them, which I think is a really cool idea. I think this game, for me, in many ways, is going to live and die by the quality of a lot of the side stuff, or a lot of the additional filler-type stuff that they add in here to explore the city in Midgar. Although I do think I mostly like the direction they're taking with actually adapting and remaking the game. Adapting's a weird word. It's not really an adaptation, it's a remake. There is some stuff that leads me to believe that maybe when this whole thing is all said and done, I might like the original version of Final Fantasy VII's story more. To kind of talk about the big controversial thing here that I'm sure a lot of you already know about, and I guess spoilers for the end of the demo that's going to come up in like 30 minutes or whatever, but fuck it, who cares? I'd rather talk about this now than try to rush out my thoughts, because it's a big thing. In the original version of Final Fantasy VII, you have the whole reactor bombing mission here. Everything blows up, and then when you go back to base, Jesse makes a comment like, oh, I didn't think that I made the bomb that strong. And they kind of leave it at that. Now, what this ends up doing with it is that they have a scene where it shows that the bomb really didn't work, or at least it didn't work all that well, and Shinra ended up blowing up the reactor and causing way more destruction than intended, which also, it seems like, I don't know how the game itself is gonna really handle it, because the demo at least doesn't really go into it, but it looks like it causes a lot more damage to the surrounding area than whatever Avalanche's bomb would have been. And I've seen a lot of people point to that and be like, hey, that's not that bad of a change, it's basically just confirming something that was kind of hinted at already in the main game. But that's, I don't know, I don't like that, because I like that ambiguity. You're right? Like, I like the idea that we're playing as these, some say freedom fighters, some say terrorists, like eco-terrorist type thing, right? Um, I like that kind of ambiguity of not knowing whether or not you're the ones who, because that original phrasing kind of implies a few different things, right? It could imply Jesse is incompetent and made the bomb too strong, which kind of reinforces the idea that Avalanche is this ragtag bunch of, like mercenaries and soldiers that are doing this freedom fighter thing, and they don't really even know what they're doing, and they're causing a lot of destruction that they don't even necessarily intend because of it, which I think is an interesting idea and really ties thematically into the story and everything it has to do with, fighting for the planet and the ecology and all that. But then also, too, taken the other way, the idea that Shinra would destroy one of their primary resources just to fuck over Avalanche, that is kind of an interesting thing to think about, but I think having that ambiguity there so that all of these different ideas can linger in your head is more interesting than just confirming, no, this is the actual course of events. We are choosing to focus in and expand upon these parts of the game. Is something that I don't know if I particularly care for, and I think that if the game keeps following that sort of track where we can't just leave things be ambiguous, we have to confirm certain courses of action were what actually happened, I think the story is going to suffer for it somewhat. That being said, I think the fact that we're getting more character banter and stuff like in-battle character dialogue that, from what I see, is really well written and funny and endearing in its own way. We're seeing iconic scenes that we've always known and loved, adapted, in my opinion, pretty cool visual fidelity, just great visual fidelity, well choreographed. It's kind of a trade-off of some things being made maybe a little too... I don't know. I think some things maybe... I don't even know if I want to say dumbed down, but I think there is going to be some stuff that, it's kind of the book problem where, I always envisioned this as being cooler or more interesting in my head. In the same way, I think that there is an argument to be made, and I've kind of seen this online a little bit from fans of the classic game. Because the classic game was able to use pre-rendered backgrounds and fixed camera angles, because of just the way it was and the style for PS1 games at the time, you had more of a... Just when you were actually playing the game and moving through spaces, you had more of like this cinematic perspective on the world that maybe had a little bit more character and personality than what you get just with a fixed position with the camera behind Cloud as you walk around spaces. But at the same time, I'm hoping that the game and the people making the setting are smart enough to know that, and smart enough to make the more detailed and more expanded upon culture of the setting and just the architecture more interesting from Cloud's perspective and all that. I think that with every possible flaw that the remake process could bring us, I think that there are ways that they can make up for it and focus on things in other ways, to the point that I don't think that... I've never thought of this remake as something that is going to replace the original Final Fantasy VII. I think that there's a lot of fans that are worried about that, and I think that idea is silly. Final Fantasy VII, in its original form, is one of the most well-archived JRPGs of its era. It's out on fucking everything. You can get it on your phone right now if you wanted to, both iOS and Android. It's probably not the ideal way to play, but you can get it on Switch, you can get it on PC, you can get it on PS4. Pretty sure it's on Xbox One at this point. You can get Final Fantasy VII for like $10 at this point. It's not hard at all. And I mean, even it's still one of the most common PS1 games. If you have a PS1, PS2, or PS3 lying around, you can just grab the original version of the game, which I don't really recommend because it kind of has a wonky translation that was a little bit cleaned up, as I understand, in the HD re-releases or whatever. But yeah, I don't think that the purpose of this remake is to replace the original, and I don't want it to. I want it to focus on other things. I'm happy that this first game is focusing more on the setting, focusing more on Midgar, and playing around with the character banter and kind of, having even Cloud and Barrett talk in this demo, and Cloud being really awkward about talking about his soldier rank, which I think is coming up a little bit after this fight here, I think is all really, really good, and overall I'm pretty happy with what I've seen of the writing so far. I think Jesse, and for that matter, I guess, well, I don't know, we don't really see a lot of Biggs and Wedge in this demo, but if what I've seen from Jesse translates over to Biggs and Wedge too, I do think it is a little silly maybe that the Avalanche members are, I hate to use the TV tropes term, but like flanderized in the way that they are, where, you know, I think there's some hints in the original, like, oh yeah, Jesse maybe has a little bit of a crush on Cloud or whatever, and then that just kind of became her personality in the remake, where she's super flirtatious to the point where it's kind of like a joke. And I think that's maybe a little corny. I think depending on how they play it, they can win me over on stuff like that, but even then, it was just a little much in the demo. Like, it's all she talks about, to the point that I thought it was a little cheesy, but, that being said, like, I think it's still, like, the actual dialogue is snappy and can be clever, in a way that I appreciate, and I think it has a lot of heart put into it, in a way that I have honestly sometimes kind of felt from other modern Final, like even 15, I know that there are a lot of people that really swear by the emotional core of that game. I just didn't feel it with that, and I just love everything about the dynamics of the characters and what I've seen so far from them here than I ever cared about the 4 Final Fantasy 15 boys. I like this a lot. This is something that I didn't notice, I never experienced until the second playthrough of the demo here. And actually, that is something I should clarify. I played this demo like basically the day it came out, and then I haven't really touched it since. This is my second playthrough, and it's been weeks since I last played it, so I wish there's a lot of things I did here that I was like, oh yeah, this is dumb of me, and then I ended up remembering. So yeah, my play isn't the best here, but that is one thing actually I guess I should talk about too, is a lot of people have noted this game is maybe not necessarily difficult per se would be the right word on the normal mode here, but you know, it demands attention, which is more than I can say for a lot of action RPGs in their beginning hour, assuming that the balancing here is going to be representative of the beginning hour. You really got to think on your feet, and you really got to be careful with how you use your ATB gauges when you stack them up. In a way that I found super engaging, and you know, I'm someone that likes a good challenge in my RPGs nowadays. If the game I feel has a good system to complement it, otherwise I just kind of like to enjoy them for the story, and I don't care too much about the gameplay if I feel like the combat system isn't really that well tuned. But no, I'm super curious. If this is the first hour of the game, I cannot wait to see what the fuck hour 30 looks like when you get materia, equipment, limit breaks, summons. Just when you pile all of that stuff, I think that there's a lot of potential here to make a really fucking fun action RPG system that I'm just gonna love to death, and it just makes me giddy with excitement thinking about all the possibilities.
You're choosing me over the reactor? That's sweet, but I'll wait my turn. Go blow her mind.
See, like that line right there, I think is kind of cute. Like, I think that's fun. It's maybe a little on the nose and hammy, but I don't know, what can I say? It's endearing to me. But yeah, I'm really happy because honestly too, the thing I saw from a lot of people that played this demo over and over again, and I probably should have done that a little bit myself, was people playing it like 2 or 3 times and then going, oh holy shit, every single time I fight the Scorpion boss at the end of this demo, I'm doing it faster and faster. And I love that with games like this, where once you really start to internalize the systems and how they work and how to optimize the damage output and when to stagger enemies, that's really satisfying, and I'm really interested in seeing how this goes. And actually, even here, Cloud has 2 different stances he can go into. So he has a slower but more powerful Punisher stance that I've been using a lot more this time around than I did my first playthrough, because when you're dealing with those drones and weaker enemies, you just go through them like butter when you're in Punisher mode. The downside is you're kind of open to projectile damage, and you move really fucking slow, but also too, when you guard in Punisher mode, you get this really cool counterattack that really builds up the pressure. There's a lot of depth here, and I absolutely love it. I have seen some people complain too, like, okay, you took what was basically a 2-minute boss fight and, you know, a 30 to 40-minute intro sequence from the first game, and you made it this huge, overproduced, big-budget thing where it's suddenly a multi-phase boss fight now, and there's all these different components to it, and you made it way more complicated. It used to just be the simple thing you could cruise through as, like, a cool opening mission. You had to make it all complicated and all that. And I guess I can see that, and I feel like in another world, there is a version of me that could also complain about that. But given the context of this game and what this game is trying to achieve with its gameplay, you need you need an opening section this long. You need something that will teach you how to use these systems and teach you how to use all of the abilities. This is a much more complicated game than the original Final Fantasy VII. I mean, at the point we are in this remake and the original game, we're still mashing the attack button, basically, and probably not even really using spells unless we're getting bored of mashing attack, right? There is a lot more going on here, and I think you really needed this, this opening segment here to be this in-depth, or else you would get people that would be thrust into the game and not really know what's happening. And I've seen people complain about this boss fight and how, oh, okay, suddenly it's like this, like, 3 or 4 phase thing now. Something that I noticed, and I feel like maybe is going to be a recurring thing with all the boss fights, or at least, if it's not, I think it would be very weird for just this first one to be like this. When the phases change over, the boss's pressure gauge resets, which I think is I think that's intentional, very much so. I think what this game is going for is that when you get to each of these different phases, you need to pressure them as fast as possible, like I'm doing here, and really build up that gauge and make sure you get the stagger in, because if you're dealing unoptimal damage, you're going to end up wasting a bunch of energy. And oh god, this area of effect, I suck at dodging this area of effect attack with the lightning. Every single time I notice it, I just feel like I lose brain cells, and I'm like, what am I supposed to do again? Your dodge in this game is also very tight too. Maybe you can upgrade it later or level it up or something. I don't necessarily know how it's gonna work with all the stats and materia and stuff, but you really gotta be on the ball if you want to dodge on time and not take any damage or get hit out of your dodge. It's tricky. And I kind of appreciate that, because it would have been easy to make that overpowered and abusable in a very melee-oriented game like this. But, what was I saying? Oh, yeah. No, so, like you see here, suddenly that pressure gauge is gone now, and, you know, we have to restart all over again. So, I think a large part of high-level play in this game is going to be really, really focusing in on enemies' weaknesses, because the pressure gauge will go up a lot faster when you're, yeah, there we go. That was my failure to dodge again. The pressure gauge will go up a lot faster when you're using, like, electrical attacks or whatever the enemy is weak to. And I guess one thing, the only complaint I think I've ever had with this demo is actually this section here, and I'm not just saying it because I'm dying, but when you're using your melee attacks with Cloud, I've noticed it can feel a little awkward to figure out if you're actually hitting the field generator here that you need to take down. Like, I don't know, it's just awkward, and I never really, in either of my playthroughs of this demo, I never really got a feel for whether or not I was doing it right, or you know, sometimes I felt like I was being knocked back against the legs here. And also, too, the first time I played through the demo, I never got grabbed like that, so I was like, oh god, what the fuck do I do? What the fuck do I do? And then, of course, yeah, I tried to thunder the field generator there, and it was just immune, so I was like, oh god, what do I do? This was embarrassing, so Cloud got knocked unconscious, which didn't happen my first playthrough. I was like, ah, fuck, I can go through this demo fine, right? And then, of course, Cloud got smacked around, so maybe I should have done a practice run, but whatever. You know, I guess if this is like a demo impressions video, I guess maybe it's not too bad to show off kind of a more raw reaction like this. This is only my second playthrough after many weeks, of course, so. And yeah, when it starts to target you like this and get a little scary. And try to dodge and just barely didn't make it out. That was frustrating, but, you know. But yeah, I like this a lot. You can switch between your characters that you're using here. You can also issue commands if you want a character to use a specific ability, but you don't want to switch to them proper, which is pretty cool. Obviously, they need to have built up ATB. You build up ATB just by doing regular melee attacks, by the way. So excuse me. Sorry about that. I've been talking for like 30 minutes straight, very fast and very loud and excitedly, so I think I needed to give my throat a little bit of a break there. Sorry if I sound a little hoarse all of a sudden. I think I kind of wore myself out there. No, but as I was saying, so you need to build up ATB by using your melee attacks, and then from there, you cash in your ATB with different abilities, which can use up different amounts of ATB bars. So, as you see here with Cloud, I have one, and I used that ability and missed horribly, and now I just built up another one. It's that blue bar right underneath the Cloud's health there in the bottom right. So, you know, you kind of have this interesting dynamic going on where it's like, okay, so do I want to build up just one and then save it for if I need to heal, or do I just want to use it right away so I can get the pressure up and stagger the enemy just like this? And I got Cloud's limit break just in time for the stagger, which is awesome. Check out this animation. Hell yeah. Ah, oh, it feels so satisfying. Almost 1,000 damage. Good shit. And then, of course, immediately goes out of it so it can activate its second or third phase here, even already. Fire a bunch of rockets and shit at us. God, this game just looks amazing. Just this wonderful combination of just big budget, beautiful animation and texture quality and character models and all that. Particle effects, just the whole shebang. On top of just fantastic art direction, in my opinion. They could have made this look really bleak, dry, and bland, and I think they made it look exactly as I would have wanted it to, honestly, from a big, high-fidelity Final Fantasy VII Remake. Really love the look of this game, love the look of the UI and menus. Very, very sleek, and, you know, harkens back just enough to the original, in my opinion, to my liking, while also still feeling very modern for 2020. I love it. But yeah, the one thing about switching characters too is I have noticed, and I feel like this is intentional, and at first I didn't really like it, but the more I thought about it, the more I started to like it. So every character has like a secondary attack thing on triangle. For Barret here, it's a big charge up chain shot that he can do, and you can only do it when you have a full meter there, so you can keep smacking that triangle button so he'll charge it up, and then you can, you know, shoot it all at once. And Barret is very reluctant to use that when you're not in control of him. Similarly, I've noticed that it doesn't really seem like Cloud goes into Punisher mode that much if you're not playing as him. And I kind of like that, because what that means is that you can't just play as one person. You really do have to treat this like a JRPG and play the whole party. If you want someone to use their thing while you're still playing as someone else so you can do some cool combo type stuff, you can make that happen through the command menu. But if you want to switch over, it's just a D-pad press away, and you can just take direct control and do whatever you need to do with that character. And I just appreciate that they don't have everything going on autopilot, so you can just play as Cloud all the time, because I want to play as the other characters. I love the cast of Final Fantasy VII. And I'm just happy that the game gives you plenty of reason to not just mash mindlessly on buttons and dodge out of the way and guarded stuff. You really do need to be focusing on these menus too, and, you know, doing these pauses and really taking stock with what you can or can't do and thinking about your situation. It's just, chef's kiss. This is everything I would want from a game of this type, and I really hope that what we're seeing here is not only representative of what we're going to get for the rest of Final Fantasy VII Remake, because I'm sure it is, but I would really like Final Fantasy XVI to do something similar to this. And I know that this is a series that likes to really you know, this is a series that really likes to try out new things with each major mainline entry, and I get that. But I do hope that they've learned some lessons here and are looking at this for where the series starts to go from here, because, like, you know, I can't hammer this home enough. This is the most I've been excited for playing a Final Fantasy since I was like a teen. It's so exciting for me, guys. I can't wait to see what the fuck this game ends up doing for me. And we got the final stretch here, phase 4 here, I'm pretty sure. And it's going apeshit. And that's one thing I like too. The rockets that this thing fires count as projectiles, so if you get stuck in Cloud's Punisher mode trying to deal with them, you're just gonna get fucked, which is pretty cool. Similarly, enemies at range with machine guns can whirl down Cloud when he's in Punisher mode too, and he's too slow to catch up to him, so you have to switch to the operator mode. It's interesting. And then also too, I know a few people have noted this already when they played through the demo, but you can get hit out of your spells and abilities, and you can see Cloud just getting fucked up there. Should have blocked that. I wasn't even in Punisher mode anymore, I don't think. But yeah, if you use an ability or spell at the wrong time, it'll just knock you out of it, and I like that a lot too, because again, it adds some more strategic depth. You can't just, you know, you can't do what I'm doing for a lot of this playthrough footage the more I'm looking at it, where as soon as you build up ATB, you can't just go ham on using your abilities. You need to be a little bit cautious and find openings so that you can do so safely. That's something I could really work on, just looking at my play here. I'm going a little fast and loose with when I'm using my abilities, and sometimes when I need to heal, I don't have the opportunity to do so, because, like, right here, Cloud just doesn't have enough ATB, and that's a problem. Oh, this thing's almost dead, though. Start to whittle it down. God, yeah, swinging that Buster Sword around just feels as good as I would have wanted it to.
Damn it. Need to heal up soon.
And I like the characters even noting stuff like that, at least early on in the game, too, because there's a lot going on here, and I bet this game can feel probably a bit overwhelming for newer players. So just to have the characters kind of reference, like, oh, hey, like, in case you haven't been looking at the bottom right, like, I need to heal, and, you know, the screen kind of goes a little red. Just nice UI decisions like that really add a lot, and just make it a bit more friendly to kind of getting newer players used to how these types of gameplay. And I mean, even someone like me who, you know, I've played my fair share of JRPGs and action games, and getting the feel of this game. This is a very unique style that I can't even say that other games that kind of go for this type of gameplay. I don't think I've ever felt one that has the same rhythm and cadence as this one. And I really just think they nailed it, guys. It's so exciting for me. Yeah, and right here, I take some time to heal. I like that this game doesn't heal you after every battle. You still have to, you know, buy items and scavenge around the area for stuff that'll restore your health. I like that a lot. I feel like a big modern JRPG things is to just heal you after every battle, and I've never really cared for that. I do like the inventory portion of RPGs as much as I know a lot of people don't care for that. And you know, having to stock up on stuff and make sure you're being mindful of things when you go into, you know, basically dungeons like this, and making sure you have what you need before you go in, or get into interesting situations where maybe you get hit with the status effect you don't have the proper item for, and, you know, stuff like that. I know a lot of people find that annoying, but I've always found that, you know, part of the depth of RPGs, and a nuisance I wouldn't want to go away, even though I know a lot of people don't care for it. You have kind of corny stuff like this too, like that timer conveniently stops when as soon as like a cutscene happens, and as soon as you start to go back into playable Cloud mode here, it'll pop back up, and then just as soon as it starts, it stopped again. Yeah, and unlike the original game too, you do have the option of setting the bomb for 20 minutes or 30 minutes. Just set it for 20, you have more than enough time. It's kind of funny they even gave you that option. And at least in the demo, you get a extended cutscene thing towards the end if you chose the 20-minute one. I don't know what that's going to be like in the main game, but I guess we'll see. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like suddenly I'm starting to run out of things to talk about. We've been going for 40 minutes here, but chess, yeah, chess are pretty cool. Don't got much to say about the chess in this game. I do think that it's interesting how they have these breakable cargo boxes that can have a little bit of health restore in them, or you know, mana restoration. I like this banter here, though. Cloud saying the Burger King line there. But God, yeah, even you know, shit like this or whatever, where you're climbing up that ladder like that, and the camera does kind of pan to a more interesting angle to show off the reactor falling apart in a way that I find very appealing. I really love how this game looks.
Don't worry, I'll be fine. I've got Soldier Boy with me.
Oh no. Crank that. Don't crank that.
Soldier Boy.
Damn, ex-Soldier Boy. He's Soldier Man now.
We don't have time for this shit. The clock's ticking.
Cool it.
And, I guess the only other thing to talk about that I can really think of, because I feel like I've basically covered everything, it's going to be interesting to see how I feel about this whole thing after I'm done with it, and, we don't really know how long we're going to have to wait for the rest of it, right? And that might be, like, am I going to be wrapping this up when I'm, you know, living my life in 2030? Like, what's that going to feel like? That's a long, you know, just on a personal level, that's a long time to stretch out this weird remake series, and hopefully now that they have this basis here and they got the first game out, hopefully we don't have to wait too long between these entries. But if they want to keep up the quality and make them look as good as these, and obviously with new hardware coming out soon, I'm sure they're going to want to do stuff with that. You know, I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of thought put into what they want the rest of the Final Fantasy VII world to look like once we're out of Midgar. And honestly, too, like, I'm curious to see what the fuck the final boss of this game is, or what they do with the ending, because I guess minor spoilers for an ancient game, but, like, leaving Midgar is kind of a cool moment where it's like, oh, the world map opened up to you, but it's not really, like, a big boss fight moment, right? I know from trailers and stuff that they're adding what looks like another soldier guy who's on, like, a motorcycle that I think they've maybe implied as kind of like a little bit of a rival to Cloud, so maybe they'll expand on that guy's role and make him like this weird fake, like, first villain guy who maybe the final boss fight will be with him, but also that'd be kind of weird because it's just some dude who we only know from the remake, but maybe they could make it work. I don't know. Maybe, like, it would be weird, but like, the early portions of Final Fantasy VII, Sephiroth is like this haunting presence, right? But he's not really like a boss fight. I don't know if maybe they'd add in like a first fight with Sephiroth there or something, but also I don't know if I'd care for that, because that feels maybe a little fan pandery and corny, but maybe they could pull that off, or maybe make it seem more natural. Who knows, right? Like, but I really doubt that they're gonna have the ending just be, oh yeah, you do this sick motorcycle like chase thing, and then suddenly you're out of Midgar, and then the game ends, right? Like, they have to have a final boss fight. It's supposed to be, for all intents and purposes, they're saying even though they're treating this like a Final Fantasy VII remake, they're also treating just this first part here as a full Final Fantasy game with a full Final Fantasy playtime and everything. So I'm assuming it's going to have a proper final boss fight. At least I'd hope so. I'm just curious to see what the fuck that ends up looking like, because it's going to be weird figuring out what exactly they do. Yeah, they just chose a very awkward place to end this first one, though I guess it does make sense. You know, Midgar should probably be its own game, though personally speaking, and who knows, maybe they'll do this, but if I had what I would have done is I would have had the game, you know, like maybe the gameplay stuff ends at maybe the gameplay stuff ends at Midgar, and you find a way to have like a cool final boss fight with, you know, something. Maybe even like a Shinra mech, or like a Shinra. I guess if they did the Soldier OC thing, that kind of already would be like a big Shinra final boss. But you know, the Midgar portion of this game is very Shinra focused, so if they make the final boss like a big Shinra head or something, like, I guess they could make that work. But I'm curious to see what they do. But yeah, as I was saying, what I would do is I would figure out something to do with that final boss fight, so that it at least feels like we're done with, we have a complete story arc with at least the beginning portion of the story here, with Midgar, the state of Midgar and Shinra and all that kind of feels like it wraps up nicely. And then what I would do is have the game end at Calm with the flashback, and you get the original version that you see in the game of, what happened at Cloud's hometown and stuff like that. And then that could act as a kind of a hook for the later entries. Though I don't think they'll do that. I think maybe that'll be the start of the second game from what it seems like they've said. Because it really does seem like as soon as you get out to the open world, that's when this game is going to cut to credits. So, curious to see what they do for that. And yeah, honestly, the more that I'm thinking about, like, what the fuck are they gonna do for the final boss? This is baffling me, and there's so many different directions they could take this, and I'm excited to see what they end up doing here. I'm sure a YouTube thumbnail is gonna spoil me. This is like one of these days, because YouTube is really bad about recommending stuff that's not even out yet, and people are bad about having really spoiler-filled titles and all that, so, like, I'm sure it's gonna be, like, Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 1 Final Boss Fight, and it's gonna be, like, Cat Seath or whatever, just right there is the final boss, and it's like, whoa, surprise, but, I wouldn't even mind if, like, just to wrap up this initial Shinra arc, like, if they added, like, an OC Turk character, because, the Turks really play heavily into the first part of the game here, too. And even just having a new one who can act as, like, a major villain that the party could defeat and then move on from, with little consequence to the rest of the plot, I think would make sense. So, yeah, we're near the end of the demo here, and all I can say is, even though that I have some, minor fanboy, dare I say, too fanboyish, too fanboy-y gripes here and there with, how they're deciding to remake this game and what they're deciding to clarify, and kind of the lack of ambiguity for some stuff now. Overall, I'm still really excited for this game. I cannot wait to play this in a few days. I'm taking off of work on Friday so I can play it just day one, which I haven't done since Devil May Cry 5, and I don't do too often. Normally I can wait, but for this one I'm like, I could use a personal day just to play this and enjoy it. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this, and I'm hoping all of the character stuff and whatever cool side quest stuff that maybe they do, and just in general, just the fun of actually playing the game and the combat and everything, and the expansion of the setting, I hope is what I really fall in love with here, even if maybe the main story ends up feeling like a stretched out and possibly even watered down version of the original Final Fantasy VII. Hopefully they can make the big moments land still, as much as possible, and they don't fuck with things like way too much, but I guess all we can do is wait and see. But yeah, I'm really fucking excited for this game, and I can't wait to see if I end up being excited for Remake Part 2 as well. So yeah, I think I'm gonna stop talking for now, and that was probably 50 minutes of me sounding way too fucking excited for my own good, so hope the game ends up being great, or else this video will be awkward if I end up not liking it. And there's our big boy there. Sephiroth! Have a good night, everyone.